Welcome to the Circular Economy Show. We're happy to welcome our online audience. We're streaming this session from the iconic venue, this Roundhouse in London. And we're streaming out on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, all of those cool channels. I'm Seb, and this is my co-host, Jules.
Thanks, Seb. And today we have been exploring the great potential that the circular economy has to help us address some big global challenges like climate change and biodiversity loss. And we have seen plenty of innovation in action in our amazing demonstration zone. But we know that more action is still needed.
And we are cramming a lot into this final session. We are going to go back into that amazing demonstration zone you can maybe see behind me. We're going to be asking what's needed to fundamentally accelerate the transformation of the economy to invest in the high-impact potential innovation that we're showcasing here, and who's needed to make it happen.
And we're going to be diving into what a circular economy startup actually looks like, what opportunities are they tapping into, and what barriers do they still have to overcome.
We are really the culprits of everything that we see around us. We have to have a future where designers are chosen for great work that includes a concept where you're thinking about how things are used, or you're thinking about what happens to them at the end of their life. I was on the train one morning to Waterloo, and I noticed 3 guys holding identical coffee cups. And they clearly bought it from the same coffee place and gotten onto the train. And it was interesting because they were enjoying it. At the end, we all got off at the same stop, and they all threw their coffee cups in the same bin. And what I realized were 3 key things. A, they bought from the same location. B, they had the same product. C, they threw it in the same end location. In designing something premium, why not put something that's even better? Why make it single use? And could I give them a better product to hold? And instead of them throwing it into a bin, I can bring that product back into some form of reuse.
Any stories from the uni days? Do you have any like mystery?
Gosh, I don't think anything I can say here in this setting.
Clap, clap, clap. Interestingly, my career or my journey started off as aspiring to be an architect. The excitement was around building tangible things that people could use and experience. I think that's always been my approach to everything in terms of how I look at the world, how I problem solve, is to think about how to create well-being at scale.
We were in Copenhagen at the time and said that she had this idea to propose a new kind of packaging. It made complete sense because it works.
The design was really a constant balancing act. It had to be good enough that people would want to use it and would be happy to be seen using it, but you didn't want it so good that people would then not return it. The return rate is critical to the success of the project, so we had to hit that balance.
My first impression of Safi is, she's just on it. She's with it from the get-go. It's kind of, here's what I'm trying to do. You can help us do this while, making your business better, your impact on the earth better.
Committed is a word I would use to describe her.
I will go into a restaurant or cafe with my own reusable Club Zero packaging and then ask them to put it in there. In 2015, consumers were not aware of the global plastics issue. Your average consumer believed that everything they threw away was magically sorted. And that concept of sorted, they realized in 2017 with the likes of David Attenborough and Blue Planet, there was no such thing as sorted.
Give me a clap.
Cup? I haven't got... Oh, cup. Oh, sorry. Give me a cup.
Can I order a latte to go, please? I've bought my coffee. I've got 1 cup and 1 lid on my items borrowed. I can either do 2 things. I can return it to the nearest drop point, or I can arrange pickup from home. So this goes back into the case. When I'm finished, I'll drop off my cup and lid and separate them, and then walk away. That's it.
This is convenient for consumers, and that they understand that this is at scale. That's really important. This is something that we are developing to have everywhere in a city.
Offices and corporate entities around London will place a bulk order with us. When they order, they request that they want to use reusable or sustainable packaging with their order. Pack it up, send it out that way. It then gets collected, goes off to their sanitation facility, and then comes back to us. It's clear that they have a goal to improve the amount of packaging going to waste and to do it at scale.
What is convenience and what is the cost of that addiction we have to convenience? So the notion that you're going to use a cup once to drink, a coffee that big and then chuck it in the bin doesn't make sense.
How do we evolve into a circular economy is multiple things. We need to have more communications from government, councils to explain to a consumer what to do. It's about creating more adoption. That's where the scale part is missing, making sure that this is everywhere in a city.
Yeah, so we've seen Safia, the movie star, and now you're here in flesh, Safia. I want to dive right into it because what that film reminds of is there's lots of exciting examples of reuse and other circular economy innovation on the market. There's a clear case for it, exciting pilots, lots going on, but we know that it's still relatively stable as a very small percentage of the market. So what's the challenge?
Sure. I think it's moving the needle. Like if you look at examples like electric cars, EV, we're at peak Tesla now in 2022. Their journey started back in 2006, 2007. So to socialize this idea into a consumer's mind is the first fundamental key thing. All of us are already believers. We're in the room together. But when we leave, immediately the world around you hits you. The reality of what we do hits you. And so how do we socialize this concept? That has to happen across multi-stakeholder. It has to happen through government. It has to happen through multi-communication channels. It can't just be me as a startup telling everybody this exists. Please go try it. And so socializing this concept of reuse, the idea that you can go into a restaurant or cafe and that they will automatically offer you a reusable is something that should be normal, and I believe it'll be there within 2 years' time.
By the way, you've guaranteed me that this box that we've
Made you sit on that.
Will hold me for the next 4 minutes.
It will.
If anything bad happens, you owe me something. But yeah, so just to dig into that idea a bit, like, what do we mean when we talk about trying to build customer demand? Because it's not, like, it almost sounds like we're trying to make people want something they don't want, but that can't be right, surely.
That's exactly it, actually. Yep.
You want to make someone want what they don't want.
Well, you didn't know you wanted an iPhone until you saw it. You didn't know you wanted an electric vehicle until you saw it. Now, 25% of all automobile sales are electric, and that tells you something. So we have to fundamentally, everyone in this room, are the people who have to help as well in terms of socializing this. And once you socialize, you get the idea in someone's mind. It takes them a long time to want to slowly shift. I'm not an early adopter of EV. I now have an EV. I would say I'm actually peak EV as far as I can tell. So I'm not even first generation EV as I might be first generational pioneers in reuse. So there are certain people along the journey that get you there and becomes a movement over time. It's not something that happens overnight.
I guess that's why the permission of pilots is good, because it gives you that kind of interaction with the customer to kind of learn the wrinkles and also start to build up that familiarity. And then you also mentioned, both in the film but also on stage, policymakers, governments and their role. It's easy to say, of course, we need policy. Is there anything specific we need from policymakers, or you need from policymakers?
Well, it's annoying that we've fallen out of the European policy for the circular economy plan, but certainly that has really sped policy across food service in particular. So we're seeing from the 1st of January 2023 mandates for reusable packaging across food service. France, Germany, list of countries that are participating within that. That's fantastic. That means you go from what we see woefully at 2% for reusable across packaging to, guess number?
10%.
40%.
Amazing.
That's huge. So when people say, well, yes, regulations definitely move the needle because, and it isn't even incremental. This is within a matter of months, everybody in food service will go from literally 0 to 40% reusable packaging across their product lines. That's huge.
That's really the incentives that are motivating the economy, and that's what you're working against today, that you want to work with tomorrow. Safia, the red light's going off.
It's flashing.
We have to
it.
stop. Thanks so much for making the time to chat. So lots of room, plenty of food for thought for the room in that conversation. Let's get another example. My favorite circular economy show host is back in our demonstration zone. Laura, who are you with?
Thank you. Thank you, Seb. I am back in the demonstration zone to talk to one of our amazing innovators here. I have with me Jose Manuel Moller from Algramo, a startup from Chile that is creating systems for refillable packaging. So, Jose, before we even talk about what Algramo does, what does Algramo, the name of your company, mean?
So Algramo means by the gram, in the way we start working with from grams, and now we stick it to it, and we're expanding as it is.
So what do you do?
So Algramo is a circular economy platform that we're trying to encourage users to change their behavior around packaging. And to do that, we collaborate with the biggest CPGs, with the biggest retailer, to offer existing product in a different way, with a reusable way, with the packaging as a wallet, which is a technology that we already patent and we're launching.
Thank you. And you've mentioned that you've partnered with some of the biggest players in the packaging industry, Unilever and Walmart, among others. So what have these partnerships led to? And also, what are some of the key learnings from them?
So first of all, working with this type of partners allow us to go to the mass market. So not only for the high-income millennials, vegetarians like me, we are designing this for everyone, which at the end they make decisions based on price. So with this type of partnership and with this type of location, we could hit mass market, focusing from the low-income consumer to the highest income consumer. And this has been allowing us to show that this is feasible and works in all the type of environment and could work from Chile to the UK, to Indonesia, Mexico, or US.
And so have you run some pilots with these companies? What do we have here? You were telling me just before that this is from one of the partnerships you've had with one of these big companies.
So what we have here is one of the Unilever brands. It's Omo, the laundry detergent brand, which was the first one that we launched. And with this one, we have been reusing in Walmart now in home delivery and in mom-pop stores in Santiago. And what we encourage the user is to reuse each time the same packaging. We give them a deposit into the packaging for the next purchase. So that's why we call this the packaging as a wallet. And giving an economic incentive for the reuse. It's not only about a pitch, about environment, it's also giving the incentive. Because we know that to convince the whole plan in the coming years, we need to give them an economic incentive, but not only for the consumer, also for the brands. This must be cheaper than single use, and also must be feasible for the retailer. So that's the challenge that we are solving, and that's the space that we're trying to work with.
And I mean, we've been talking the whole day here about how to scale, and we love pilots, but we need to think as well about how we are going to accelerate this. So I have a two-part question for you. What does Algramo need from big businesses to move beyond pilots? And also, what does Algramo have left to prove?
I would say that maybe my other colleagues from other startups, they will share this, but the big corporates, they need to learn about disrupt themselves. So doing the same that we have been doing the past 30 years and reducing a little bit the plastic of the packaging is not going to save us. So we need to seriously disrupt the supply chain and to be willing to do that. We have been working with great partners that are already doing that, and I would say that that's the first step. And the second one is to speed up the process. So if you know that this is going to happen, how we move, as you were saying, from pilots to rollout, which we're going to be doing this year for the first time. So because we already have the information and we can prove that it's feasible from the economic perspective, from the user side in terms of our purchase rate, but also needs to scale to have a greater impact.
So disrupting the supply chain and making the economics work. Thank you so much, Jose, for being here with us. And now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Jules, who is going to be speaking from someone, actually, from a large business.
Thanks, Laura. We've heard from some innovators that are growing, but they've still highlighted the need for more investment, policy support, and business-led action to help them accelerate their progress. I'm joined by Aline, who's going to give us a perspective from a large global business. So, Ab-InBev have launched an innovation accelerator. Can you tell us what it's done?
Yeah, so the accelerator came after we launched our 2025 sustainability goals. And when we were mapping what we should do to be able to achieve all our goals set up on climate action, circular packaging, sustainable agriculture, and water stewardship, we mapped what we already knew we could do to achieve, and we figured out we still have some open space and some things that we would have to disruptive and find innovations to overcome those challenges. So the accelerator came to help us close those gaps and to help us get connected with these new companies that are challenging the way we do business and helping us to achieve these goals. In packaging, our goal is to have 100% of our packaging either returnable or made of majority recycled content. And returnable is really a big challenge for us. We already have 36.5% of our portfolio in returnables, but we know that convenience is still a big point for consumers, and these challenge, together with some others, are things that we are trying to overcome with these new disruptive innovations. So within the accelerator, we are trying to find solutions for new packaging materials, rethinking the packaging materials that we have right now, programs to increase collection and recycling rates, as well as bringing traceability and transparency to everything that we are doing.
So you've got a lot of activities going on, and you're global. So when you think about breaking some of these down, are you taking market-specific approaches? How does that actually play out?
Yeah, that's an important thing. Although we are a global company, facing global challenges as many other companies here, we recognize that these complexes are very complex and they vary a lot from region to region. So we take a local approach. In every single market, what we do is we sit together with the team, we map all the challenges they have, we write all the challenge statements with our local teams to be sure that we are trying to solve for their local problems as well. We also recognize that these entrepreneurs working with us, they are well connected in their local community, and they know how to solve their own issues and also how to use the stakeholder network to make things happen. So local is definitely one of the key things. Of course, we also try to find and bet on innovations that are scalable. So although we are piloting locally, the idea is to bring that solution into other markets that have similarities. So one great example is in 2020, we pilot with Normal Waste, that is a Colombian startup. We pilot a recovery program for one-way bottles. The idea was to bring these bottles back to be reused. And what we did was we learned with them. We understood if they wanted to be in other markets. We decided together with them we were going to do in another way. And we are expanding now the program in Mexico. So we launched the big program in Mexico, counting already with more than 30 allies. And what we do is we connect with the waste management, and through this program they are bringing back these empty bottles that we are cleaning, inspecting, refilling, and bringing it back to the market. So we are avoiding the production of 100 million bottles so far, avoiding, of course, greenhouse gas emissions, as well as being able to pay more for this material than a cullet, for example.
Amazing. And we've only got time for one more question, but very quickly, something that you've done that's quite interesting is work with peers. So, for example, Coca-Cola. Why did you take that approach, and what does that actually look like?
Yeah, so last year, the Coca-Cola company, Unilever, and Colgate-Palmolive joined us in the accelerator. And the idea here is, one, we have very ambitious goals all the companies here, actually. And we know that if we want to really create and do the transformation needed, we have to work together to be able to find solutions that are scalable and in the speed that we need. So I think this was the main thing.
Fantastic. And just so everyone in the room and listening knows, applications for your next accelerator round are open until?
April 30th, so end of April. Please join us at 100accelerator.com.
Fantastic. Thank you, Aline. So we've just heard from a large global business, but we know that business action alone is not enough. Policy and policymakers also have a really crucial role. Seb, I think you're with some people who can tell us more about that.
Yes, Jules, I certainly hope so. And yeah, I feel like I'm on the stage with the really critical people now. So I've got Lamia from ReLondon with me and Oriana from OECD, both of whom work on the circular economy with small businesses in a city context. Oriana, you said something really interesting to me that I'd like you to say again now, that you've seen a palatable shift in the cities you work with in terms of thinking about the circular economy. It's not just waste management, but something much more. What's the impact of that?
Well, first, it all starts with the semantics. It's the use of words that is really different. What were waste department, now they are circular economy departments. In many cities, like small cities like Tallinn in Estonia, we're working with at the moment, Buenos Aires, a huge city. And this doesn't mean that things will change from a day to another, but definitely provide a totally different perspective, a more holistic one that goes beyond waste, which is seen as an issue to deal with, towards resources as opportunities. And there are several examples, several initiatives all around. For example, in Paris, where I live, there is a district, which is the fourth biggest business district, whereby 30 companies, they share services, equipment, infrastructure, they do carpooling, they reduce food packaging, and so on. So they are trying really to experiment what a circular district and then cities could be. And this is not the only example, there are many others. So meaning that the circular economy in cities is not utopia, but probably we're not there yet.
So moving from kind of cleaning up mess to how do we design better cities. Exactly. And let me, the work at ReLondon, your work specifically, is focused on driving that kind of change through especially small and medium-sized businesses. Why that target group in London?
Yeah, so the short answer is that the transition to a circular economy in London isn't going to happen without SMEs. 99% of businesses in London are SMEs, and they account for over 50% of the business waste generated in the city. So we need them to be part of the transition to make the circular economy a reality on the ground. And the flip side is that the small and medium-sized businesses are going to be the powerhouse for innovation because they're small, they're nimble, they're agile and close to the customers, so ideally positioned to really disrupt the market and introduce new circular business models. And even large corporates or the public sector that wants to change and adopt the circular economy need SMEs to be on board because they make up the supply chain. And obviously it varies by industry, but if you take the construction industry, the majority of service providers are SMEs. So the challenge though is that small businesses don't always have access to the information or the resources or the investment for change. So that's why we think it's really important to support them and make sure that they can demonstrate and amplify all the impact they're having.
And it's a there's a lot of variety when we see SMEs, right? There's a lot of different kinds of SMEs. Where are there one or two places where there's any kind of signs of particular momentum? Like, is London ready for the circular economy? I
mean, London's more than ready. London's already doing it. So yeah, definitely. I mean, we've already worked with 300 businesses looking to adopt or scale circular business models. And we're already seeing them have great impact on the ground. So our 5 biggest food innovators, for example, alone, have tackled 26,000 tons of food waste in 2021. And that's 5 times more than 2 years before. So the rate of increase of impact is really exciting. Other signs of momentum are that we're starting to see multiple multiple competing solutions come onto the market. So you've got multiple options now for refillable deodorant or zero-waste grocery shopping. So really, the market is maturing. And we're seeing, that happening in the private sector, but there's also growing demand from the public sector to access this innovation, where we're seeing demand from local authorities to use the circular economy as a way to build economic resilience on the ground through different programs.
I mean, that's great to hear. And I guess, Oriana, one of the things that's the kind of momentum is clear. Making the economics work at scale, still a bit of a challenge. What kinds of examples of mobilization has OECD seen? Like, where are the signs of momentum across the cities you work with?
So access to finance and mobilizing finance is a huge challenge for cities. 73% of 52 cities that we worked with, they actually argue that this is one of the obstacles. But there are many examples, like the city of Valladolid in 2018 mobilized €1 million for 65 projects, and in 2019, additional 600,000. We worked with Glasgow, I know colleagues are here, and through Zero Waste Scotland, there are also several millions mobilized for that. But what I would like to say is that making the economics work doesn't only mean mobilizing finance, it means changing behavior. And so, for example, there are cities that are applying discount on taxes to make sure that this can create incentives for companies, for example, to reduce food waste, reduce packaging. The same happens in San Francisco with waste taxes discount in order to increase separate collection. So it is important to mobilize finance, but also to use economic instruments to change behaviors.
My light is going again. It's really powerful to hear the potential that the right enabling policy. Almost the way you describe it, you're both talking about how do we create a kind of ecosystem where there's only really choices that are kind of circular if you want to be a successful business, and that's very inspiring. So thank you both so much. Give them a round of applause. So one startup that has successfully worked in collaboration both with large businesses and also in a city context, and that is Wino. And very fortunately, they're in the room today, and I believe Jess is with them in the demonstration zone.
Thanks, Seb. I'm here with David from Wino, a startup that uses AI to reduce food waste in commercial kitchens. Hi, David. Can you tell us a little bit more about Wino, and are you able to show us how the technology works?
Absolutely. So Wino develops artificial intelligence tools to help chefs in large kitchens like staff restaurants, universities, hotels, casinos, and cruise ships to run more profitable and sustainable kitchens by cutting food waste in half. So we work in about 45 different countries. We work with the likes of IKEA, Hilton, Compass Group, Iberostar, and many others. And effectively, what we're trying to do is teach a machine to see the food that's being thrown away. So the field is computer vision. Now, why would you want to do that, I hear you ask? Well, the problem that we solve is that 5 to 15% of all the food that a chef buys will end up in the bin. And the reason for that is that it's very difficult to measure it. So our mission is just to make it as easy as possible to measure. So if you'll come on a bit of a journey with me, maybe use your imagination, because we didn't want to bring real food waste into this lovely venue. I've got a fake piece of fish here. So imagine it's Friday. We've had our fish lunch at the university canteen, and unfortunately, we haven't sold some of it. I was going to have to throw it away. So the chef will come and they'll throw the fish into the bin. Underneath the bin is a digital scale, and it registers that there's been a change in weight. We ask the user to identify why the food was wasted. Where did it come from in the production process? So in this case, it's mains. In real time, the AI looks at the picture that we've taken, and in this case, it's given us 4 options. So the first option, it's saying we think it's breaded cod fillet fish, so it's got it right. But it could also be carrot, maybe it might be tomatoes, or could it be an omelette? And it's asking us to verify that it is fish. On this screen, then, the user will see the weight, but also, crucially, the value. So that's really important to raise awareness of the true cost of food waste. And then the chef will go about his or her day, and we've made it really easy to record that piece of food waste in a really detailed way. So over the course of the service, the kitchen will continue to register all of their food waste. That then is pinged up to the cloud. Our analytics platform then analyzes that data, and in the morning, the team will get a report, and it will detail exactly how much food waste occurred, what the different items were, and then also where they should focus to make improvements over the course of the next day's service. And we find that over a period of about 6 to 12 months, that we typically be able to cut food waste in half, and that can be significantly beneficial to a business where if they're wasting 10% of the food they buy, we're able to cut their food purchasing cost by 5%. So it's a big kind of business value proposition as well as the environmental as well.
Thanks for that, David. That's really impressive. And so Wino is being used at the moment with loads of global major companies, right? You're even in all of the IKEA restaurants all over the world. How did that happen? How did you achieve that scale? And sorry for using that word over and over again.
I know it's become a bit of a cliche today, scale, hasn't it? But for us, we really focus on global businesses. It's where we can have the most impact. As we scale up the technology, we'll look at the longer tail of kind of individual restaurants. But for us, and the way I describe Wino is a tool, ultimately the heroes of this story are the chefs. They're the ones using the tool. They're the ones who use the data. And so it's really the kind of winning of the hearts and minds as an onboarding process to get the team up to speed and for them to understand why and the rationale that we would want to install this kind of funny box with the lights into the kitchen. But what we always find is there's probably 2 or 3 people within every kitchen that we work in who are just like, yes, I hate throwing food away, but I never knew what to do about it. And so kind of being able to find those people, kind of hold them up as champions, give them empowerment, and give them a role in kind of telling the story, we found that's the way to scale impact.
Thanks. And what is next for Wino?
So at the moment, we're saving our clients $40 million of food every year. We're really proud of that. The kind of equivalent in CO2e is about 62,000 tons. But we've set ourselves an ambition to save $1 billion worth of food over the next couple of years. That's what we're all working towards. We need to scale this AI in order that it's so powerful that we can literally just install it into a kitchen and the team will start to get data the next day. We're getting to that point. We've trained this to now recognize over 600 different types of food items, and we're really proud of that, but we need to go further. And if we're really serious about meeting the Sustainable Development Goal to halve food waste, we see this as an important step for the whole hospitality industry. We think in the future, every single kitchen will be equipped with some type of AI device. From a circularity perspective, you know, they're linear, traditional environments, you might look at them as inefficient factories. If we can equip teams with data and give them insights in order to kind of drive operational improvements, we have a real chance of having a massive impact on a global scale.
Thank you, David. And now we're back on stage. Oh. We're back on stage with our head of finance, Emily, to talk about the critical role that investors can play.
Thanks, Jess. And now we come to the hidden world behind every growth story, the finance. And I'm joined on stage by 2 people who are at the heart of that world, investing in circular economy on both sides of the Atlantic. Jamie from Circularity Capital and Georgia from Closed Loop Partners. Thank you so much for joining us. So we've just heard from Wino, and I think I'm right in saying that that was the first investment that Circularity Capital made.
That's correct.
And so can you talk a bit about your personal story from moving from the previous CEO of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to setting up Circularity Capital?
Yeah, so I think when you're at the foundation, you're constantly thinking how to scale, and you're thinking what interactions you could make to really scale up. And back in 2009, we were captivated by the concept of the circular economy. We'd read lots of literature about it, but there was nothing out there about how it actually creates financial value. So we ended up working together with McKinsey and producing a report called Towards the Circular Economy to demonstrate how much value the circular economy could create. And I believe that played a role in corporates getting more interested in the circular economy as it was launched at the World Economic Forum in 2011. I think the next logical step in my mind was investors are a bit different, and we have to think like an institutional investor. So big sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, insurance companies, fund of funds, who own the majority of the capital in the world. And the way that those actors react is based on returns, right? So they invest more money if they see good returns. So to me, it became critical to demonstrate how the circular economy can drive premium financial returns alongside measurable positive non-financial impact. And that was the genesis behind setting up a fund that had the right skill set to select the best of these types of companies and then bring them the right support to help them to grow and achieve their full potential.
And Georgia, Closed Loop, we're another early mover in this space, focusing on specific needs of circular economy companies and innovation. So what does that mean for the types of financial solutions that you offer?
Thanks, Emily. I think what we've really seen is different kinds of companies require really, really different funding needs, and that's based on the growth stage of the company and the type of the company. So for example, a company that provides composting infrastructure versus a company that provides digital technological solutions to trace supply chains will have very different needs. And so Closed Loop Partners was really set up to meet the diverse funding needs and meet companies exactly where they are. So we have an innovation center, and we then span venture capital, growth equity, project-based finance, and private equity. So that kind of goes through from the really early stage to the later stage where we're actually acquiring companies to build circular supply chains. So ultimately, our goal is to build the circular economy, and so our platform is set up to create that flexibility to meet the diverse needs.
So looking around the room today, I think there are far more innovators than we would have seen even 5 years ago. So Jamie, I'm wondering, what are the things that have really created this market and created a fertile ground for circular economy investors?
Yeah, I think there's 4 things. I think the first one is just the recognition that in the right context, these circular businesses can create more value. So companies can develop deeper margins, stickier customer relationships. They become more valuable and grow faster. Secondly, I think we're increasingly seeing a sustainability imperative. So this is a generation of consumers demanding to know more about the provenance of products, and it's also more regulatory legislative pressure. Thirdly, technology is definitely enabling this transition. So knowing more about the status, location, demand, condition of products allows us to develop more business models. And finally, there's a really attractive exit environment. So we're seeing an increasing number of investors looking for financial return alongside some societal problem solved. So call it ESG, in a more purist form, impact investing, and they're combining to really accelerate this transition.
So those are some of the things that can help, but we've heard for some of the speakers today that there are barriers and not every great circular economy idea gets invested in. So what is already happening or could already happen or could happen to break those barriers and really drive momentum in this space?
Yeah, so I guess at our level, that's all about building up a really good picture of what best-in-class looks like for these kind of businesses. So looking at lots of the same types of companies, establishing what the key attributes are and also what the common challenges are, and how as an investor we can bring the right toolkit to support the management teams to unlock their full potential. I think at a higher level, there's a number of things, and many of them have been spoken about today, but I think collaboration. I also think anything that internalizes the external costs, so for example, reducing VAT on remanufacturing through to putting a cost on carbon, and also organizations like this, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is bringing people together. There's also, we've got Zero Waste Scotland, we've got London, we've got people from all over the world who are actually bringing people together to hear more about the amazing solutions out there.
And Georgia, I want to stick on this driving momentum theme. Are you seeing your work start to filter through to the sphere of mainstream capital? Are larger investors starting to invest in the companies that you might have invested in?
Yes, definitely, which is really positive to see. I think generally during the pandemic, there was a concern that sustainability or circularity might be put on the back burner, but really we've seen the opposite is true, and there's been a massive acceleration of investment activity across the board. And maybe to make it a bit more tangible, I think, one example is a company that we invested in early on. We gave them a loan, which was a company called Temperpack. They create a sustainable alternative to styrofoam, and they very recently closed closed on a new equity round of 140 million, and that was led by Goldman Sachs. And so it's these kind of indicators that more traditional mainstream capital is seeing the value of circular solutions to mitigate climate risks, to meet ESG goals, and then fundamentally to kind of build more resilient supply chains. So it's really encouraging.
Yeah, definitely. And so what's your message to the innovators online and in the room? What should they focus on to really have the best chance of their circular innovation being investable?
Great question. I think it's a couple of things. I think number one is to be really effective in communicating their impact story. I think as more and more innovators enter the space, having verifiable impact data to support the work that they do is going to be really important to differentiate themselves and be authentic. I think the second is always we're looking for sort of the market appetite indicators, and so whether that's a letter of intent from a client, pilots, or contracts that are in place, that helps show a market signal in the right direction. And then lastly is the team. Always, a phenomenal team is critical and mission-driven and smart, so yeah.
Yeah, lots of food for thought there. So thank you so much, Georgia and Jamie, for joining us today. And I really, there's other investors in the room, and I really encourage you to spend the drinks later to take the opportunity to spark up conversations. And now I'm going to hand back over to Jules.
Thanks, Emily. I'm joined by Jess from Appeal, which is a circular economy innovator that has arguably achieved the startup dream, unicorn status. That is reaching $1 billion valuation without being listed on the stock market. But we know that money alone is not enough. So you hit unicorn status in 2020. You've received funding also from the likes of Katy Perry, Oprah, some pretty big names there. And we're talking about an edible coating that removes the need for packaging from things like fruit and vegetables. So how did you achieve this growth?
Great question, and thank you so much for having us here. Well, I mean, in the very beginning, it was really about starting with the problem. I think most people in this room are familiar with the fact that 1/3 of all food produced for consumption goes to waste. That represents about 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions when you take all of the resources that are used to produce that food and distribute it into account. At the same time, 1 in 9 people are going hungry. And for some types of food, specifically highly perishable food, these waste rates are even higher, upwards to 50%. And so what we identified was really part of the issue was time. It wasn't that we weren't producing enough food to feed the need of the global community. It was that we didn't have time to get that food to those who need it, or at least that's one of the biggest factors. So we set out on this mission to try to create more time, specifically for fresh fruits and vegetables. Flash forward 6 years later through R&D, and with really 2 main guiding principles. One, we don't think that anything should be on your food except for food. So really, in looking at the suite of materials that we could use, that was a core component. And the other was, nature is the greatest innovator, and that's really who we look to. So instead of going into the lab and synthesizing something the world had never seen before, we studied the peels and skins of fruits and vegetables to understand what was it about the molecular structure or specific components that were creating the barrier that slowed down water loss and oxidation naturally, for lack of a better word. Why is it that when you pick an apple off the tree, it doesn't immediately go to mush? And so that was the inspiration for our product. So after this kind of 6 years of identifying those specific molecules and developing this product, we thought, great, we have this product, fruits and vegetables last twice as long. Clearly, this will be valuable. We'll go to the produce suppliers and we'll say, we can make your fruit last twice as long. And they said, that's great, but the retailer's trash can is my best customer. Why would I want to make these foods last twice as long? And that's when we really started to learn and understand how the incentives of different stakeholders in the value chain were really critical in developing our business model, something that I think most or very many circular economy innovators are facing.
And you've just touched on, the ability and the need to figure out your place in that ecosystem.
Yeah.
If you're also thinking about the citizens, going into shops, buying products. You've got a very clear story to tell, but how relevant or how prevalent was that customer demand from the beginning? And did that help you scale?
So we provide an invisible product for an invisible problem. So we're still, and that's one of, I think, the biggest important factors as we continue to scale is educating the consumer. But really what I think that first main hurdle for us in business model development was starting to talk directly to the retailers. We still would need to work in their upstream supply chain to apply our product and have really wonderful supplier partners now, but the retailers are the ones who saw the value. They have waste on their shelves, there are plastic packaging issues, they're responding to the consumer who is starting to understand these issues and value having more sustainable options at the store. And so the retailers were the ones who really started to create those incentives, and then their suppliers want to service the retailers, want to provide a better option, want to connect more with the consumer. But I would say one of our biggest challenges is that education piece. And as we've scaled globally, the research we have to do, the work we have to do with the retailers to communicate about a product in the produce section where there's very limited real estate for any kind of messaging. We have to get very creative, and we're trying things with QR codes and messaging out that side the store, and working with certain retailers to do even in-store demonstrations of our product for consumers, because they might not see that tiny, I don't know, 1/3 of a centimeter logo on the sticker in the store.
And kind of as you've gone through this journey, clearly you've received a lot of funding, you've done a lot of research, there's a clear problem you're solving, and you've got a very clear vision of where you want to go. As you project yourself into the future, 1 or 2 years, do you then have everything you need, or what's going to be the next unlock for you?
Scaling, it happens in a number of different dimensions. So I touched on the need to continuously educate consumers and understand what more time means for each market segment, for even each supply chain. One supply chain might find value in shifting logistics so they can go by sea freight instead of air freight. Some, it's all about food waste or plastic packaging. So really having strong partnerships where we're bringing stakeholders at different stages of the value chain to the table, the suppliers who we're applying our product with, the retailers who are right in front of consumers, to figure out how do we get more value out of this additional time is a big part of that. We also, every new product that we work on is a new journey. The reasons you throw away a banana are very different than the reasons that you throw away a lime or an apple. And so understanding even what shelf life means and what specific quality factors we need to affect for it to be less likely to go to waste is a huge part of launching every new product for us. And at the same time, produce is grown all over the world to serve the same markets. And you can't really go to a retailer and say, we have this great product, but we can only offer it during the Spanish growing season. And they're like, well, I don't want to carry something I can only carry 6 months out of the year. So oftentimes, we've had to develop multiple integrations in different continents in order to supply one SKU for one retailer. So it's kind of a complex business model, but it's exciting to get that traction, and we've shown that our product can reduce food waste on shelves by 50%, really across regions and contexts, and what we're really excited about now is measuring that impact in consumer homes too.
Amazing. We've only got time for one last question. I'm sure there's a lot of innovators online and in the audience today hoping to get to the position that your startup has managed to. Based on your experience, what is the one piece of advice you would give to those people?
I think the biggest thing is to not lose sight of the problem. We say we want to be obsessed with the problem that we're solving, not the solution. We've changed our business model many times, and we're still trying out new things. Even understanding what is shelf life? Like, it seemed simple, but we're still asking ourselves that question with new types of produce. So I think, yeah, being obsessed with the problem, and our head of R&D kind of jokes when he walks into the room, this is probably not the best way that this table was built. We just don't question it.
Yeah.
And so thinking like that, really in everything from business model development to R&D, I think just puts you in a position where you're guessing and checking a lot, because that's the only way you learn.
Amazing. So questioning everything, being very specific about the problem to solve, but completely open to the solutions to get there. Thank you so much for taking that time. Seb is actually going to jump back on stage now with me. So thanks, Jess. Wow, we've certainly covered a lot of ground. Investment, business, policy, startups.
I'm on this side as well.
Yeah, I know. This is the first time today.
I looked over my right shoulder. Yes, and I loved what Jess just said about always being obsessed with the problem. I feel like I want to share a personal story. You know, we spent all day together, Circular Economy show audience, we speak regularly. I remember waking up a couple of years ago and thinking, having a bit of like a personal crisis. I was like, am I just always talking about scale? Am I just saying the same thing over and over again? Because a few of our speakers today have alluded to, oh, that word scale again. And then I thought, well, yeah, of course I am, because that's the problem. That's the problem we need to solve. We do need to talk about scale, and that's what we're here to fundamentally solve. And hopefully this session has given us a bit of a taste of where we are on that journey today, in the context of what we heard earlier in the day, which is that a circular economy that's regenerative by design is something we fundamentally want to aim for if we're going to tackle the big challenges we face. And of course, a lot is already happening.
Well, love your stories. Eagles earlier, scale today. Anything's possible. So thank you to everyone who joined us in the Roundhouse today. Thank you for being such active participants. And thanks to everyone who joined us online as well. Do remember to subscribe to our channels if you want to see more content like this in future.
The question is not whether this transformation is possible. It's what we'll do together to make it happen. If you're in the room, please do stay and have a drink with us. Online audience, see you next time on the Circle Me Show. Bye.
Bye.